This is a lecture on Lesson Module 9, Law and Social Control. These are the objectives that I hope you'll be able to accomplish after you complete this module. We're going to start out with a slight little review of law and taking you back to the first couple of modules from this course where we ask the question, what is the purpose of law? How do we accomplish justice through the law? I'm sure you remember reading all about all the different philosophers and sociologists and their theories about law, its purpose, and how it goes about accomplishing justice. And so just to remind you, um, law is there to provide order, peace, stability, predictability. It's a type of formal, rational decision making. If you refer back to Weber's different types of decision making, law is formal, rational decision making, and it is what allows our economy to thrive and be successful. Law is intended to achieve the justice and fairness that we all seek. Um, but law does that by controlling the behavior of community members through law enforcement. So let's think again about what types of law we have and how it enforces or controls it, how it enforces law and how it might control us. So remember, there are different types of law. There's private law or civil law, then there's public law, criminal law. You have juvenile law, administrative law. We've studied all of those. And the differences between those types are based upon the subject matter, of what types of laws, what are we trying to deal with? That's how you divide up when you're looking at those categories. That's what you're looking at is the subject matter of the law. Whose behavior is being controlled? Who is doing the controlling? Um, that's how we differentiate there between public and private law. Um, but there are also different styles of law, and that differentiation is based on how behavior is being controlled or influenced. So let's look at those. These were developed by, I believe he's a criminologist named Donald Black. He came out with these. So we would start with compensatory, and that's a pretty easy style for you to recognize. Of course, that refers to civil law. We're talking about compensating an aggrieved person who, accuses another of breaching a contract or not carrying out a property transaction, maybe injuring them. That's compensatory law, and that tends to be private law. It is a type of social control because in the aggregate, even though we're in private law, you're dealing with individuals suing each other for money. In the aggregate, the public learns of the outcome of these individual disputes and changes their behavior based upon what they've learned about the outcome of these lawsuits. I went over that, I believe. We were talking about torts and tort reforms in particular. Um, so civil law is compensatory in the sense that the plaintiff, if the plaintiff wins, is going to be compensated by the defendant. The defendant is held accountable for the bad behavior because they have to pay. So it is accusatory because the plaintiff and the defendant are adverse to one another. The goal is to compensate, and it controls social behavior because the public learns of these judgments. They learn, and they base their choices on those outcomes of the private lawsuits. Conciliatory style of law is what you might see in family law, which is also a civil private law. And when you say conciliatory, you were thinking about reconciliation. So with family law, I think of marriage and adoption. We're trying to achieve a resolution that is not accusatory. We're just trying to work at a problem to build peace and stability. And so this helps with the control of families and maintaining the strength of the family as part of the infrastructure of all society. The penal style of social control is obviously criminal justice and criminal punishment. It is definitely accusatory because a defendant is being accused of violating the law, and here you have the society doing the prosecution and punishment, and the accountability of the offender is paramount. We're trying to control and influence behavior by punishing what is harmful. The last is therapeutic social social control. And here we're referring to more than just the individual defendant. So for penal social control to work, you have to draw some assumptions. One is that the defendant, the accused, is rational and moral and will weigh the costs and benefits of their choices. So penal social control really is only going to work as a deterrent if members of society will think before they act and say, okay, I'll be punished by society if I make this choice. So maybe I shouldn't make it. So there's some assuming going on the part of the individual defendant or accused in penal social control. But with therapeutic social control, you're focusing more on the community side of it. And we're looking at the larger causes of bad behavior. We're not really accusing a particular defendant. We're trying to provide a community that prevents criminal behavior. And then we're also trying to heal an offender, seeing the offender as somehow a victim of circumstances or a victim of failures that the society has made in not, meeting the offender's needs or meeting the needs of all members of society, not just that one offender. So it's looking at the bigger picture of social control and trying to find ways to sort of establish a community where criminal behavior isn't chosen ever. Okay, so those are the different styles of social control that Donald Black gave us. I've gone through some of the categories we studied in this course earlier. And now I'm going to introduce something that's kind of be a broader perspective of social control, because social control can be accomplished by more than just the law. So it's not just the police and prosecutors. It's not just private lawsuits that have influences on social behavior. It's bigger than that. And so I want you to kind of step back and look at this from further away when we talk about social control. There, of course, is formal social control. That's what we just talked about. Law enforcement, private lawsuits, justice system, civil and criminal. But there's also informal social control. And this is the influence of other people and whether they like us or not, whether they would allow us to be a part of their group. Do they accept us? Humans are naturally social beings. We want people, especially our peers, to like us and include us, and we want to fit in. That's a natural aspect of human behavior, is to kind of be accepted and fit into your community. So as a child, your whole life is surrounded by your family. You want to please your parents. So your parents have a lot of influence over your behavior. They control your behavior. You get a little older, your friends are the big influencers. You want to please your friends and fit in with your friends. And even as you age, that desire to please make your family happy, your parents happy, make your friends happy. And it just continues to get a little bigger. You want your community. Do you want to fit in to your community and sort of conform to society's expectations? And I'm going to show you see this image on the screen here of some people in a waiting room at an eye doctor's office. This is just a clip or a frozen image from a video. And I'm going to change my screen a little bit, and I hope this works. I want you to watch this short clip from a TV show called Brain Games.
We set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a new appointment.
Have a seat, and they'll be out in just a couple minutes.
Great,
thanks so much.
Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think.
Okay, so I hope that you got to watch that quick video and saw the power of social control through conformity with our community. And that is informal social control. And as you saw, it is extremely powerful, perhaps even more effective at controlling our behavior than law and law enforcement is. That's a matter of opinion, but I just thought that was so interesting. And I'm sure you can look back at your own life, your own choices, and what is dictating the things that you're doing and the choices that you're making. For most people, it's probably your peers. It's probably your community. Anyway, so that's formal and informal social control. Now we'll look at, I don't getting ahead of myself. All right, still looking at formal and informal. So scholars have recognized that there's an inverse relationship between formal and informal social control, and this is going to make sense. In a heterogeneous society such as ours, such as America, formal social control is the most effective. And that is because we are diverse. And our America wasn't founded by some sort of uniform identity, ethnic identity, religious identity. That's not America. We're the melting pot. A lot of different people from different places with different ideas, different values and opinions. So we are a heterogeneous society, and to an extent, our communities will influence our everyday choices, but we need more than that. We need law and law enforcement to prevent criminal behavior. So as in heterogeneous societies, formal social controls such as law and law enforcement will have play a bigger role than informal social control will play. But in homogeneous societies or homogenous, however you pronounce it, informal social control may be all that's needed to prevent any sort of harmful behavior. And a good example of that is the Amish community. If you know very much about it, living in Greenwood, you might actually see more of the Mennonite community, especially if you go to the pantry shop to buy food, which is really delicious there. But that's the Mennonite community. They're a little bit different than the Amish, but they have some similarities. So you might kind of relate to that. But the Amish are actually a religious group that broke off from the Catholic Church during the Reformation, moved around a bit. They're mostly German, and they immigrated to the U.S. in the 1700s, mostly in Pennsylvania and Ohio. But so their identity is their ethnicity and their faith. And so they're a homogenous society. They are agrarian in their economy. They dress very plainly. You see the gentleman there next to the horse. It's black and white, not a whole lot of color style going on. So they all sort of dress alike. They all reject technology. So they're not going to have cell phones for sure, TVs. They do not use any modern technology. It's very old school, old world. And they practice a very conservative form of Christian theology. They are semi-communal. So they all live close to each other, and their community is their whole world. So they consider themselves very separate from the rest of the world, and their separateness is established through their rules, through the way they dress, through their beliefs, and how they control each other's behavior and influence each other's behavior. They don't have a police force in their community. They control behavior through shunning. It's called Meidung, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. There's a kind of a long and elaborate process. If someone wrongs you, there's certain steps you go through to try to reconcile with this person who has wronged you. And if you move through the steps, and as each one fails, you move to the next and to the next until you get some success. And the final thing, like the last resort, is to shun or exclude someone from the community. So that cohesion and sense of belonging in that community, that works best for controlling and influencing behavior in a homogeneous community. And so they don't need formal social control. They can rely on these informal things in order to accomplish peace and stability and predictability. Whereas in America, yes, our peers do have a big influence on our choices, but we are still such a diverse nation that we are reliant a lot on formal social control, the law enforcement. This is probably going to remind you of Emil Durkheim's theories of social solidarity. It ought to remind you that we are an post-industrial society. So it's that organic solidarity that operates on us in America, and with all of that diversity among us, we are dependent upon formal social control to keep the peace and order going. Okay, now we move past formal and informal, and we go to direct and indirect. So direct social control is external coercion, external control, forces outside of us that are influencing our choices. And in the example, it's the obvious, there you go, police officer. The actual presence of a police officer will change your behavior, especially if you're driving too fast on the highway. What are you going to do when you see a cop? You slow down or make sure you're driving the speed limit, one or the other. That's direct social control right there in your face, and it immediately changes your behavior. Then indirect is internal coercion. It's when our own internal belief system dictates what our choices are. So we learn right from wrong as a child, and we internalize those norms and beliefs about what is right and wrong, and self-regulate going forward. So as you grow up, you develop the ability to self-regulate your own behavior. You can also look at it as like a moral compass too, just knowing right from wrong and internalizing certain rules that you may be born with or that you've learned through life, and those things making choices for you. Here's an example, an interesting example. Have you ever been driving home or to work, maybe late at night, and there's not another car anywhere in sight, and then you come up to a traffic light and it's red, and I bet you stop, even though there's no cars coming? You wouldn't hurt a thing. If you blew through that light and kept on going, you're not going to hit anybody. There's no other cars there. But you stop anyway because you were so used to it. You have so internalized stop on red, go on green. You've learned that. And so you do it. And maybe after stopping, you might kind of go on. But it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, and you might be worrying if there's a camera somewhere recording your tail light or your license plate to see if you're following the law. But there's really no need to stop. So why are the lights red? Anyway, a lot of people do it anyhow. And that's because they've just kind of internalized the rules about red light and green light. Okay, so let's try to put them all together. We've got formal, informal, and then direct and indirect. You put them all together and you get 4 types of social control. And I don't have words on the screen, so you gotta listen. Tell you. Formal, direct. What is formal, direct social control in this picture? Look at this kid. Looks like he's probably taken a standardized test, maybe. And he has gone to great lengths to appear compliant with the rules. A fake arm of some sort, or maybe he just put his sleeve and stuffed it with some paper or something. And underneath his desk, he's got his phone and he's searching something up. Not paying attention, not following the rules. Okay, so a formal, direct social control in that scenario would be a teacher walking up and catching the student cheating there, searching up the answers on their cell phone. And then the teacher takes the exam away, makes the student leave the classroom, gives them an F in the course, maybe reports them to the authorities for violating this rule about not cheating and using your cell phone. That would be formal, direct social control handling that situation. Now, what would informal but direct social control be? That would be those other students sitting around this young man. Maybe they're his friends. Maybe they notice that he's cheating and they look at him and grimace, give him the stink eye, A little bit later, they might fuss and exclude him from the group. But that would be informal because it's not the authority figure. Um, it's direct because they are in the presence of the student who's cheating. So it would have to be his peers that are there in the classroom with him. And his desire to fit in with them would probably affect his choice. Maybe he'd put his cell phone away. Now, indirect but formal social control would be if that student didn't cheat because he was afraid of getting caught because he knew it was wrong and he had kind of internalized that understanding that it's wrong to cheat. And then informal, indirect social control would be choosing not to cheat because you know your friends would shun you somehow or shame you somehow by excluding you from the group or criticizing you on social media. Okay, that would be informal because it's your friends, not the people in authority over you. And it's indirect because you're internalizing this desire to please your peers. Formal indirect is choosing not to cheat because you've internalized the rules of the authority figures of the university and the professors. Cheating is wrong. You've internalized that. You choose not to do it. Formal direct is actually getting caught and getting punished. And then informal direct is getting caught by your friends and getting shamed later. Okay, so those are the 4 different types, and they provide a really good way to analyze types of social control, kind of identify them and describe how they work. But now you've got to look at the more specifics of it. So we're going to limit ourselves to just formal social control, our justice systems in America, because that's what this class is in the end is about, looking at our justice systems in America. So we're going to limit ourselves now to just formal social control and the different mechanisms in our justice system that influence behavior or punish it. So I'm going to give you a list of purposes for punishment now. So social control doesn't work unless there are consequences for the violation of law. So assuming we are wanting to punish bad behavior and enforce it, let's see if these different types of mechanisms of social control will be considered effective. So what are the purposes of punishment? Well, hopefully it's to deter. Hopefully some mechanism of social control will deter bad behavior. That's deterrence. Making a specific individual choose not to repeat the bad behavior again. Or it could be, in general, influencing society as a whole because they witness other people's punishment and that deters them, makes them choose not to copy that behavior. Deterrence really only works, specific deterrence really only works if it is different or a contrast to everyday life. And let me explain that a little bit further. It's called the contrast effect. Okay, that's where I'm at. The higher the contrast between a person's everyday life and the experience of the punishment, the more effective the punishment will be as a deterrent. So punishment has to be painful to work, all right, to deter. So let's take, for example, a student who has always gotten great grades, always had the esteem of his professors, and hardly ever gotten in trouble. But one day in class, couldn't resist the temptation to cheat on an exam, pulls a cell phone out, looks up an answer. Teacher walks over, notices, takes the cell phone away, or probably takes the exam and then kicks the student and the cell phone out of the classroom, then reports the student to academic affairs for violating school policy. That would be a high contrast because you've got a really good, successful student who's never really gotten in trouble and here they are getting kicked out of class. They might get a 0 for the course. They're being reported up the channels. It's humiliating. They feel ashamed. That's a high contrast effect. That's a very effective specific deterrence. But some students get in trouble all the time and don't make great grades. And so in those circumstances, if that type of student got caught using a cell phone and cheating, getting punished for it probably wouldn't matter that much. Probably wouldn't work. Wouldn't be much of a deterrent because it's sort of par for the course. Okay, this is what happens to me. I make not so great grades and I've gotten in trouble. I've been through this before. What's the big deal? Right? So low contrast effect. It's not going to be a very big deterrent. So for any sort of control mechanism to really work on an individual, it has to have a high contrast effect with their everyday life. Otherwise, it's not a specific deterrent. And then again, the general deterrent is just others watching, witnessing what has happened to someone and recognizing, okay, if I were to, I'm not going to do that because I saw what happened to them. I saw their punishment. That's called a general deterrent. So you ask any specific social control mechanism, does it offer that deterrent effect? Is it effective? Okay, social control mechanisms could also be retributive. Retribution is just punishment being proportional to the behavior. So like eye for an eye. You steal something, your hand gets cut off. All right, that's extreme, but that's an example of retribution. So punishment can offer retribution. And in a less extreme example, it might be like you steal something. Okay, you got to replace it, return it, pay for it. That's retribution. So it's the proportional consequence. Like it's not revenge because it's being handled by society or the community at large through a formal rational process, but it is returning in proportion to what the wrong, you get the punishment. All right, that's retribution. Then incapacitation is self-explanatory. You incapacitate the offender. You put them in prison, for example. The goal would be to isolate the offender and protect society so that it can't be harmed again by this offender. So incapacitation refers to isolation and separation and providing safety for the community. Reintegration is when you sort of to what extent does this mechanism prepare offenders for success, help them learn pro-social behavior, and get them back on the right track? Does this social control mechanism accomplish that? Then it is a good form of social control mechanism. If it doesn't offer that, then maybe it's not as great. It assumes everyone has a stake in this predictable, safe society and will desire to be pro-social. So it's really going to work on people who care about their society, about their community, and they want to be participants in it. And then the last is rehabilitation. And there we kind of discussed that before. Rehabilitation is that rehabilitative style of social control that Donna Black talked about. But this is where we're looking at community at large and how can we fix society so that this type of misconduct won't occur? How do we help the individual learn from their mistakes and move forward, change their behavior and start to internalize better choices or better values and norms? Okay, so those are the different purposes of punishment. There's 5 of them there: deterrence, retribution, incapacitation, reintegration, rehabilitation. You need to memorize those. Know what we mean by them. And then for your assignment for this module, there's only one other than the little quiz. And it is a blog spot. Excuse me, not a blog spot. It is a discussion board post. Excuse me. So in your discussion board post, I'm going to assign you one of 4 different social control mechanisms that is covered in our textbook. This would be chapter 9 of the textbook. It's either plea bargains, therapy, or the influence of psychotherapy in the criminal justice system, the death penalty, and then political dissent. And I'm grouping in with political dissent the cancel culture. So this is shaming on social media. Because the laws in our nation currently, not historically, but currently, we don't have formal social control mechanisms for political dissent. We have free speech rights that are actually enforced now. And so you can have any political opinion you want, and you can express it as long as you don't hurt others. And so formal social control isn't really at work as like it was, like during McCarthyism, and then even some of the sedition acts earlier in history you probably know about. Those things have kind of passed away, and what we're left with predominantly now is on social media, and the impact that occurs on a person who has expresses an unpopular opinion on social media. Are they shamed? Are they shamed? How are they shamed? Who's shaming them? Does it really affect their choices? Is it a good thing? Is it good to have that sort of informal control going on to shame extreme views and shun members of society that would advocate harm? There's a place for it, perhaps. But you'll look at political dissent and then cancel culture, social media shaming. That's one social control mechanism. I may have gone through all 4 of them now. Yeah, death penalty, therapy, plea bargains, and political dissent. Yeah. So you'll be assigned one of those, and you'll write a discussion post where you evaluate it and determine, is this mechanism of social control good for America or bad for America? And you make that choice based upon its ability to deter, to offer retribution, to incapacitate, to reintegrate, to rehabilitate. I want you to identify it as being conciliatory, rehabilitate, the Donald Black styles, and analyze it. And then you make your post by Wednesday of this week. And then after you've done that, go back and read another student's post and give your response to what they had to say about a different social control mechanism. So there are very specific instructions on the lesson module assignments for this module. So if you have any questions, I think it's pretty well explained, but I could be wrong. And if you have any difficulty understanding your assignment, email me. Or if you have any trouble understanding what I've gone over in this lecture, obviously I'll be glad to go over it again or meet with you. But that's it.